If you're anything like me when I was a student, you dearly wish to play one of the Hungarian Rhapsodies by Liszt, but you think it's beyond you. I'm here to tell you that there's actually one Hungarian Rhapsody by Liszt that sounds really impressive, but that is not nearly as difficult as all the rest. If you're an intermediate pianist, come take a look, you can play this one. Now I'm talking about Hungarian Rhapsody number 5. It's a really beautiful, very impressive sounding piece, but definitely not very technically demanding. Like all rhapsodies, it's built up of small sections, every section having something distinctly different. And I would like to talk about 2 different sections. One of them is the beginning, in which a lot of students have trouble counting, and one of them is actually the first run of the piece. Now I know that always my students come to the lesson and they always practice until there's a difficult looking passage, and then they're like, okay, I practiced until here. So I thought if I practice the passage with you and show you it's not that difficult, you will not be blocked by it and you'll be able to go further along in the piece. So let's get started. Now the beginning is something that maybe looks kind of complicated, but is actually quite easy to count out. It's a simple 4 beats in a bar. And the only thing that I would think that is easy to make the mistake is that it's a lot slower than you think. It's lento, which is a really slow tempo. It starts on an upbeat. So 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So that was so slow, but that was 1 bar. So if I were you, I would count it out, not in 1, 2, 3, 4, because it's way too slow for that. So I would really count out 1 and 2. And slow counting is always much more difficult than it seems. So if you need a metronome, I would put the metronome for 8 beats. So I would put the metronome on the 1, and I would put the metronome on the and. So on the beat that comes in between as well. The second bar continues in this really slow tempo of a similar structure. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 2 and 3 It's not actually really difficult, but it sure sounds impressive. And to be honest with you, I really like that. Few work and a lot of applause. It's awesome. I would write down the beats if I were you. I would practice with metronome. And I would make sure that in this section you actually know that there's 3 voices. You have the melody. 1 and 2 and... That's the melody, and it's actually echoed exactly literally in the bass as well. It's just playing the same notes in octaves, which gives it this really kind of, I don't know, dark and impressive sound, right? And then here, both hands also have an accompaniment. Right hand and left hand has exactly the same notes, which makes it also not as difficult. And this is the accompaniment. So it's 3 voices. You have the melody, the bass, and the accompaniment. So just always be aware of the voicing in piano playing, because it really helps your musicality. It really helps you play more musical. So now let's get to the part where most of you would give up. It's the first difficult passage. And I promise you, it's not actually really difficult. So let's take a look at that now. Fermata. And that's actually the introduction back to the theme. So it sounds really impressive, but it's actually not that difficult. And I'll show you my strategy on these kinds of runs. These kinds of passages are almost always a tiny little pattern that's simply repeated. And the thing that I do, and I tell my students to do, is just learn it by heart immediately. Force yourself to do that. And it's really not that tough to learn it by heart, because it's just a few notes that are repeated. So let's take a look at the pattern. So it's just these two groups repeated. We have this group which starts on the E sharp, F sharp, G, F sharp, D sharp, C. That's one group. Then we have the second group which starts on the A sharp, B, C, B, G, F. So it's just these two groups repeated. We have the group starting on the E sharp, the group starting on the A sharp, again the group starting on the E sharp, A sharp, E sharp, and then now it changes because it goes to 8 notes. So that, and it actually is a tiny bit different from the pattern because instead of A sharp, B, C, it goes A sharp, B, D. So it goes one note higher at the very end. So just try to first of all spot the pattern, because there's almost always a pattern unless you're learning like Ligeti or something. There's always a pattern. So first you try to spot the pattern, and the second is just simply to do it by heart. Even just force yourself to, as I'm doing now, to look at the camera, force yourself to just shut the book, and I'm sure that you can actually know it by heart sooner than you think of yourself. And then there's a little trick that I like to use. It sounds really awesome, and it makes it a little bit easier for you as well, is we just start the passage slowly and we build up in speed. It sounds impressive and it helps your hands get used to, and it sounds as if you're playing faster than you actually are. So make sure that you make this beginning really dramatic, because it's going to sound more dramatic, your passage, if you give the introduction you give is dramatic. Because if you're just like, something kind of cool is gonna happen and it's alright, it's not really gonna sound impressive whatever you do. But if you kind of approach it like, okay, something epic is coming, pay good attention, then your passage is also going to sound more impressive. Now start slower. And that sounds much more impressive than if I were to do. Because that's a lot of fast notes, but there's no story to it, right? So give it a little flair. Start slowly. And also rallentando at the end. Back to the theme. So I hope I made you enthusiastic for this piece, and I hope that I gave you kind of the confidence that you can get it done. Now you might meet some difficulties along the way. Feel free to leave a comment. I'm very happy to do another video on this wonderful piece and this beautiful piece, and I hope that you give it a try. And let us know if you did. Let us know down in the comments below if you did give it a try. So that was it for this video. I hope it was helpful. Don't forget to subscribe and join our community. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week.